kick off the college football quarterfinals, and these two have some history. The only other bowl meeting between the two happened in the 2003 BCS National Championships. Let's take it back there. Ohio State here. Miami thinks they've won, but DPI is called. Ohio State would score a touchdown and tie it at 24. Maurice Clarett rushes it in. Ohio State takes the lead. Last chance for Miami. Ken Dorsey with the throw. It's incomplete. Ohio State.
Kind of just watched a couple games and seen what they do. Again, obviously they're a very, very talented defense in the back end, the front seven. They can run all over the field. I mean, sideline to sideline. They attack the ball well. They swarm, and then again, their DBs are really, really good. So it's going to be a challenge for us offensively, but, it's a challenge that we're looking forward to. But we do, recognize how talented they are and that, we're going to have to come and execute. And at the end of the day, it'll be about us.
No one better to talk the Hurricanes than Greg McElroy. He was on that call for their win versus Texas A&M. Greg, we just heard from Carson Beck a lot of praise for Ohio State and that defense. How can he and the Miami offense have some success against Ohio State?
Well, Miami cannot afford to allow this game to become some pass-heavy track meet. That's an environment where it might be difficult for Carson Beck and company to keep up. They need to ride their running back, Mark Fletcher, who accounted for over 60% of their yards in the first round. He's physical, he's got a downhill style, and that might be best to kind of test an Ohio State front seven that did show a bit of vulnerability against Indiana and giving up $120 on the ground. Maintaining a high rushing volume, they can control the clock, they can condense a game, they can limit the number of possessions that Julian Sayin and company would attack on the other side. So Beck's got to also play very smart. His regular season, he gets the ball out very quickly. He's a decisive player. He's in his 6th year. He's one of the fastest snap-to-throw times in college football. He's in the top 5. He's going to have to utilize that to negate some of the pass rush timing from Arvell Reese, Caden Curry, and company. They also got to feature Malachi Toney, who's just a jack of all trades for this offense. He could throw it, he could run it. They use the Wildcat. They throw it to him in the slot. They throw it to him in the outside. He's one of the best pound-for-pound football players in the country.
Yeah, it sounds like Miami definitely has the pieces. Buckeye star receiver Jeremiah Smith, a Miami native, offered the Canes some bulletin board material on Monday, and he did not hold back about rekindling this rivalry.
You see all over the internet, all over Twitter, they still talking about that, 20 years later, but they still worry about it. But we got something for them come New Year's Eve.
What kind of, attention do you expect? Do you expect anything, late hits, anything like that in your regard?
Late hits, stuff like that, I'm not really worried about that because I'm probably going to be the one doing it too. I'm going to be a little chippy out there, so I'm bringing it all this week. So, yeah.
I will say, as someone who went to the University of Miami and knowing that he's from Miami, saying that is absolutely crazy. If Smith truly wants to show out, he'll need offensive play caller Ryan Day to be in his bag. How do you feel about Day taking over that responsibility from the offensive coordinator, Brian Hartline?
I feel cautiously confident. Day is a veteran play caller. He knows exactly what went wrong against Indiana, and by taking over, it creates more alignment, kind of a singular, focused voice during the most critical moment potentially of the season. And if you look at the differences, Ryan Day called plays in 2023. While the completion percentage is down, the explosive play numbers were actually up. They were more of a pass-first style of attack, whereas in 25, they became a little more ball control. They kind of took the air out of the football, and while they were very efficient, I think with the style of attack that Ohio State has, the personnel they have, in particular at wide receiver, it is to their advantage to try to make this as much of a high-flying attack as humanly possible. They laid an egg in the Big Ten championship. They scored just 10 points. They stalled multiple times inside the red zone. They utilized personnel groupings that they shouldn't be using. Lean on your receivers and lean on your Heisman Trophy finalist quarterback in Julian Sayin. That's what's going to win you this game and what could win you the national championship.
Look, New Year's Eve, a very important day in my household, as I will be glued to this game. Greg McElroy with the latest. Thanks so much.
Set, and then we see it here. We got Miami and Ohio State kicking things off in the Cotton Bowl on New Year's Eve. Then we have Oregon, Texas Tech. Probably one of the more evenly matched games here out of the Orange Bowl in Miami Gardens, Florida. Bama, Indiana, Ole Miss, Georgia as well in the Sugar Bowl. and it can't come soon enough because it feels like we've already been waiting an eternity between the first round and the quarterfinals, and it really hasn't even been that long, but we just love college football. So let's welcome in Tom Fornelli and Chip Patterson as we talk storylines for each of these quarterfinal matchups, and we are starting with Miami and Ohio State. I live in Miami, and a lot of Miami fans are still talking about 2002. They won't let it up. They're on Twitter. They're saying all the things. Excuse me. Jeremiah Smith, who grew up in South Florida, by the way, says he sees it all on social media, and he knows that it's going to be a very emotional game. Chip, how chippy is this matchup going to get? Because I feel like emotions are going to be running high, and what are ultimately your expectations for this one?
Yeah, I do think this is more in the stands than it is on the field because, Jacqueline, not to make us all feel older, but, that pass interference, was it or wasn't it? Most of the players were in diapers, if they were even born at all. So do they feel it from the former players? Do they feel it from the fans? 100%. But it's not as though that's going to provide some unique motivation. And if this is going to get a little chippy, it's going to be because I think this is going to be a physical game decided at the lines of scrimmage. That it's going to be Ohio State's defensive front against Miami's offensive line. Can Miami get a push? Can Miami protect Carson Beck? And on the flip side, are we going to see Ruben Bain, Akeem Messidor, be able to get after Julian Sayin the same way that Indiana was in the Big Ten championship game? So, yeah, I do think it's going to be physical. It could potentially get chippy. But in my eyes, it's a little bit less to do with Miami-Ohio State postseason history and a lot more to do that is going to be where the game is decided, where things do get the most physical and nasty in the trenches.
Yeah, I agree with you, Chip. I do think that whoever's defensive line has the best performance will probably be the team that ends up winning this game. Because if we go back to Ohio State this year, it's lost to Indiana and then its season opener against Texas. Those were two of the best defensive fronts that it faced all season long. And those are the two games in which we saw the Ohio State offense really struggle. Now, one of them was Julian Sayin's first ever career start, but Ohio State still managed to only put up 14 points. And then in the loss to Indiana, they only managed to put up 13. So you look at that situation going up against the Miami defensive line that completely dominated the game against Texas A&M on Saturday. That looks like a trouble spot and a worrisome spot if I am an Ohio State fan. That said, Jacqueline, you talked about Miami fans being kind of chesty over last week's win. You still only managed to score 10 points, guys. It's not like you blew the Aggies out of the water. It was not a very pretty performance. Carson Beck did not have a good day. The wind clearly played a factor in that for both quarterbacks, but this time you're facing an Ohio State defense that hasn't allowed more than 16 points in a game all year. So you're going to have to play a lot better on offense against Ohio State than you did against Texas A&M if you're going to pull off this upset. So I do think it's a fascinating matchup, and I think it's going to be a closer game than the current spread currently suggests. It's going to be Miami. If they want to pull off that upset, they have to play a lot better than they did last weekend.
You know what? When Jeremiah Smith was speaking to the media yesterday and talking about the history, my head went right there. I'm like, were you born, dude? He's born about 3 years after that 2002 game. To your point, Chip Patterson. Okay, let's go to Oregon, Texas Tech. This one feels pretty evenly matched up. The lone CFP quarterfinal matchup between two teams ranking in the top 10 in both points per game and opposing points per game this season. Tom, what do you think this all comes down to ultimately? Who are you kind of leaning towards and giving the edge to in this one?
Yeah, this one truly does feel like a coin flip, and honestly, it feels very similar to the game we just discussed, in which I think that the defensive line, particularly on the Texas Tech side of things, is going to be the deciding factor in this matchup. Because it's funny, if we think back to Oregon's win over James Madison this weekend, most of the world was mad at James Madison for even being allowed to play in the game. But after the game, it was Dan Lanning who was mad at his own team for the way that they performed, particularly in the second half, in which James Madison was able to put a whole lot of points on the board and make that one look closer than it probably was on the field of actual play. So if you're the Ducks coming off of that win, you've got a lot of concerns because James Madison was able to move you around defensively and run the ball effectively. And this is a Texas Tech team that offensively, they have put up a lot of points this season, but they're not what I would consider to be a great offense. They're very inconsistent. They don't have a great ground game, and they're overly reliant on explosive plays, which they have hit. But Oregon's defense, the one thing they have been exceptional at this season is limiting those explosive plays. So will Texas Tech be able to put together long, sustained drives that result in touchdowns instead of field goals, which has been another problem for them this year? They struggle once they get to the red zone. But as far as the other side is concerned, how effective will this Oregon offense be against Texas Tech? Because to be clear, it is a lot easier to get wide open against James Madison's defensive backs than it will be against Texas Tech, because Texas Tech has that defensive line that is one of the best. In fact, I think it is the best in the country. They are fantastic at putting pressure on opposing quarterbacks, and Dante Moore has not been pressured a lot, but in the games in which teams have gotten pressure to him, you've seen him struggle to deal with it at times. So it is going to be a very interesting spot. If the Red Raiders can put pressure on Dante Moore, they will win this game. If they don't, Oregon will.
I'm buzzing about this one, Tom. I mean, this is the first game that we have between two teams that I actually think could win the national championship. Beforehand, you've got one team who's like, oh yeah, I could maybe see them making a run. I could see them winning this game. Different levels to the stakes of this. No, this is the first game in the college football playoff that I truly believe are national championship caliber teams on both sidelines. And so to your point, a lot of this is going to be decided at the margins. Texas Tech's red zone offense, the number of times they've had to settle for field goals, hasn't really impacted them because they have not played an offense like Oregon's all year long. I mean, that's how you're able to not have a very impressive red zone touchdown percentage and yet win 12 games all by 20 plus points. Your defense has been so dominant that hasn't come to bite you in the butt, but I do think it could when you're having to trade paint with Dante Moore. And then, yes, you are right. Can this Oregon offensive staff, led by now Kentucky head coach Will Stein, so we got to stay focused here, guys. Let's focus on the Ducks. Can you have a game plan to be able to neutralize David Bailey, Romello Height, the rest of those edge rushers that are going to try to get in there? Sometimes that's the run game. Sometimes it's the quick pass game. The chess match that we've got going on here is going to be fantastic because for the first time in this college football playoff, it truly feels like we've got a lot of good on the field.
And the Orange January 1st, going down at noon Eastern. Next up, Alabama and Indiana. We had conversations with our colleague Danny Cannell. I remember prior to this matchup saying, if you're Curt Cignetti, who would you rather face, Bama or Oklahoma? We all agreed it was probably Oklahoma, and that certainly is not the case. Tom, how big of a challenge will this Bama team be for Indiana, if at all?
Oh, they'll be a challenge. I mean, the thing about Alabama is, for as inconsistent as they have been this year, when they play well, they are still one of the best teams in the country. Like, you look at it from a power rating perspective, they have been a top 5 team nationally all season long. It's just sometimes on Saturday they show up and they don't play to their ability. And we have seen that at times, particularly over the second half of the season. And we also saw it in that Oklahoma game, in which the beginning of the game, Alabama looked completely overmatched and out of sync. And then they finally got their act together and played much better in the second half and were able to overcome that 17-0 deficit. And I think it all comes down to really what version of Ty Simpson shows up. Because if you've watched Alabama all year, there has not been a run game. They haven't been able to move the ball on the ground effectively. It has been a whole lot of putting everything on Ty Simpson's shoulders and forcing him to lead them to victories. And when he's playing well, he can do it. He has receivers available. He has the arm. He has the understanding of the offense to do so. But when he's not, they look pretty dang bad, and we saw that again in the Oklahoma game. So if you're looking at this Indiana team, yeah, they have the Heisman Trophy winner at quarterback. They are a very good team, but their defense, I think, does not get nearly enough credit. While they aren't filled with future NFL superstars like maybe Alabama's is, they are a very sound team that does not make mistakes. They don't miss their gaps. They force you to beat them. They don't give you anything for free. Can Ty Simpson, over the course of 60 minutes, find ways to beat them without making mistakes? That's going to be what decides this one.
I got to tell you, I think Curt Cignetti not only wants to play Indiana, I think Curt Cignetti has to play Indiana. That is the poetic finish as he continues to slay all of these monsters and continues to conquer all of these mountains in a way to truly put the Hoosiers program once at the bottom of Power Conference college football, right there on the very, very top of the sport. Because it was at Alabama where Curt Cignetti even said this week he owes a lot to Nick Saban when he was on Saban's staff. He learned a lot from Nick Saban that he still applies today, but he was also overshadowed, so much so that Curt Cignetti had to go be a head coach at the D2 level, then move up to FCS,